My name is Amanda McChesney. I'm 28 years old, and for 2 years, I truly believed I had found my future with my boyfriend, Theo Thornton. I was proud of my work, proud of the small plumbing business I'd built with my own hands, proud of the life I was carving for myself. But loving someone doesn't protect you from the way their family sees you, or the way they make you see yourself. The first real crack appeared at his father's 60th birthday party. It was one of those country club evenings where everything felt polished, rehearsed, and slightly pretentious. I wore my best navy dress, the one that made me feel capable and confident. I held a beautifully wrapped bottle of whiskey I had spent weeks researching. Theo's father loved whiskey. I wanted the gift to be meaningful, something that reflected effort rather than price. But effort was never what impressed his family. Theo's mom, Dolores, had always been polite to my face in that glossy, brittle way that sounded like a compliment but felt like a warning. Tonight she wasn't even pretending. I had just stepped away to drop off the gift when I heard her voice near the bar, sharp, amused, dripping, with the kind of superiority that made my stomach tighten. Poor Theo, she sighed dramatically to her friends. He's really dating down with this one. They laughed, not loud, but loud enough. A plumber, Dolores said, as if the word itself tasted sour. My son deserves a doctor or lawyer, not someone who unclogs toilets. Her friend chimed in with a chuckle. Well, at least she can fix things around the house. Dolores waved a hand. Please, we have people for that. He needs a wife who elevates him, not someone who embarrasses him at events like this. I froze, standing there with 2 champagne flutes, my throat burning. I knew Dolores didn't think highly of me, but hearing it laid out so blatantly, it was a punch I wasn't ready for. Then she turned and noticed me. Oh, Amanda, I didn't see you there. I felt myself go very still. People talk about fight or flight, but no one talks about the third option, the cold, stunning quiet of realizing someone has never respected you. I smiled anyway because sometimes strength looks like restraint. You're absolutely right, Dolores, I said softly. Theo is dating down. She blinked, thrown off. Well, I didn't mean... No, really. He deserves someone who sees his value. And I walked away holding my dignity like it was the only thing keeping me upright. Theo was across the room talking to his younger sister Celia, the only member of his family who ever felt real grounded human. Celia was in her 2nd year of law school, tired, overworked, constantly caffeinated. I'd helped her move twice when Theo was too busy. She'd helped me proofread my business paperwork once at 2 a.m. We'd become friends without meaning to. I forced a smile and handed Theo his champagne. He didn't notice anything off. He rarely did when it came to emotional nuance. Celia, however, looked at me closely, her expression tightening with concern. After the party, an hour after I got home, my phone buzzed. From Celia, Mom was out of line. You know that, right? I stared at the message for a long moment before replying. It's fine. She's not wrong. Another buzz. She is wrong. You're worth 10 of the guys Theo usually dates. I didn't know what to say to that. Compliments from Theo's family, any part of it always felt dangerous. Still, her words settled somewhere deep in my chest. And then the next morning, life went on. Or at least it pretended to. But once you hear the truth, you can't unhear it. Over the next week, I started noticing small things I had ignored before. Theo introducing me to his work friends as, "This is Amanda. She owns a plumbing business," said with a tone like he expected them to be impressed that I wasn't covered in grease. Jokes about my work clothes when I stopped by his apartment after a job. Comments about how my hands were too strong to be feminine. Little things. Little cuts that suddenly stung. Then came the moment I couldn't ignore. We were at dinner, a place his family liked, the kind with white tablecloths and dessert menus in French. Theo had been oddly tense all evening. Finally, he sighed, put down his fork, and said, "So, my mom thinks maybe you should look into management positions. You know, something more professional." I stared at him stunned. "Theo, I own my business. I am management." "You know what she means," he said with a dismissive shrug. "Office work. Clean hands. Professional image." "My hands are clean," I replied quietly. "I wash them." He rolled his eyes with a soft groan. "Amanda, don't be deliberately obtuse. You could be so much more." Something in my chest tightened. More than what exactly? He didn't answer immediately. Then he gestured vaguely at me. More than this. This, I repeated, my voice steady, although I felt anything but. This meaning, me. He winced. Someone who fits into my world. Our world. There it was. The line I didn't know I'd been walking. The place I wasn't welcome. We finished the rest of the dinner in silence. When we reached his apartment, I told him I needed time. He didn't fight me, didn't ask questions, Didn't even look surprised. That weekend, another message from Celia arrived. Heard you and Theo are taking a break. You okay? I responded, yeah. Your mom and brother made some things clear. A few seconds later, want to talk about it. Coffee tomorrow, just friends, obviously. We met at a quiet cafe tucked behind a bookstore. Celia listened without interrupting, her face softening with every detail. When I finished, she leaned back and said with a fierce calm I didn't expect, "You know what's messed up. You've been more supportive of my law career than Theo ever has. You helped me move during finals. You fixed my laptop at midnight. You sent me snacks on exam weeks. Theo just said, that sucks, and went out with his friends." I frowned. He's your brother. She laughed without humor. Yeah. And he's always treated me like competition. For a moment, the grief between us felt shared, hers toward her family, mine toward the person I thought I loved. Celia looked at me with something like gratitude. You deserve someone who sees you for who you are, Amanda, not someone who sees what you could become. Her words stayed with me long after I drove home. They were the first hint that everything I believed about Theo, about us, was about to unravel for good. Celia's words lingered long after our coffee talk ended. You deserve someone who sees you for who you are. It wasn't the kind of line you forget. It sits in your chest in the quiet spaces refusing to leave. For days I found myself replaying that conversation, not because I was clinging to Celia's validation, but because her honesty exposed everything I had been trying so hard not to see. Theo didn't reach out to apologize. He didn't ask how I was doing. Instead, on Wednesday afternoon, he decided to fix things in the most baffling way possible. I was in my workshop cutting copper tubing when he walked in wearing a bright yellow hard hat you could buy in the children's aisle of a party store. He held his arms out as if expecting applause. "See," he announced proudly, "I can fit into your world too." I didn't know whether to laugh, cry, or ask him if he genuinely believed this was effort. "Theo," I said slowly. "What are you doing?" "Showing you I can meet you halfway," he said with a grin that made it clear he thought he was being adorable. "I'm trying to show you I can come down to your level." The words landed like a cold slap. My level. It wasn't even subtle. "This isn't about levels," I said quietly. He shrugged. "Look, my mom says relationships only work if people meet in the middle, and I'm willing to do that for you." For me, I repeated, "Theo, I don't need you in a costume. I need respect." He frowned. "You're misunderstanding me." "No. I think I finally do understand you," I whispered. "You respect the version of me you think I could become, not the one standing right here." He didn't argue. He just got defensive, muttered something about me being dramatic, and left. I didn't chase after him. I didn't soften my voice or cushion the truth. I let the silence swallow the rest of his excuses. That night my phone rang. Dolores. "You're being unreasonable," she snapped. The moment I picked up. "Theo is willing to overlook your situation." "My situation," I echoed. "Your job, your lifestyle. Most men would be grateful." I nearly laughed. "Dolores, my business makes 6 figures. I own my home. I have 0 debt. Money isn't everything," she said sharply. "Apparently neither is character," I replied, and she hung up on me. I sat there in the quiet of my living room, staring at the wall. Something inside me settled, a decision forming solid and cold. I didn't belong in their world, because their world was built on illusion, status, and willful ignorance. I just didn't know yet how far they were willing to go. 2 mornings later, I opened my business dashboard and froze. 7 new 1-star reviews, all posted within the same hour. Rude owner, unprofessional, scams customers. She ruined my pipes. I would never trust this woman. They were fake, every single one. New accounts, no history, no profile pictures. It didn't take a genius to figure out the source. I took screenshots, documented everything, and tried to steady my breathing. My regular customers began fighting back in the comments almost immediately, but the damage was still a bruise. By noon, my phone rang again. My largest commercial client, someone I'd worked with for 5 years. My stomach twisted. "Hey, Amanda," he said cautiously. "Some lady claiming to be your mother-in-law called the office." "Ex-boyfriend's mother." I corrected my voice flat. "What did she say?" "That you were unstable, going through personal issues that were affecting your work." I closed my eyes. "None of that is true. She's lashing out." "I figured," he said. She sounded unhinged. "Don't worry, we're good." I hung up and pressed both hands to my face. It wasn't fear I felt, it was fury, the kind that rises slow and hot, wrapping around your ribs. An hour later, Celia called. "Amanda, we need to talk," she said quietly. I could hear tears she was trying to hide. What now? Theo is telling people you were emotionally abusive, that you tried to control him, that you were intimidated by his success. I let out a sharp, humorless laugh. His success. I know, Celia muttered. It's garbage. But Mom is helping him spread it. Of course she is. And some people are believing them. I sat down at my kitchen table, the wood suddenly cold against my palms. Why are they doing this? Because they're trying to punish you, Celia whispered. And because you walked away first. How bad is it? I asked. There was a long pause. Mom called the manager at Theo's gym, saying you showed up yelling, causing scenes. She said you were stalking him. I couldn't speak, not at first. Amanda. Celia continued softly. They're painting you as the unstable one. I breathed in slowly, tasting metal on my tongue. Listen, Celia said, her voice breaking. I know I'm supposed to stay neutral. They're my family. But I can't watch this. You don't deserve any of it. Celia, you don't have to choose, I said. I already did. Those 3 words were warmer than I expected. Heavier, too. Celia was stepping into something dangerous. Defending me meant putting herself directly in the line of fire. In her family, loyalty was a weapon. I didn't want to drag her into the war, but I also didn't have the strength to pretend I wasn't grateful. Later that night, I finally faced the truth. If they were willing to lie about me in public, I needed to protect myself. I went through every text, every email, every voicemail Theo had sent in the last year, building a detailed timeline. It wasn't petty revenge, it was survival. And that's when I discovered what I had missed before. Messages where he called my business embarrassing but lucrative. Plans to upgrade once I helped him pay off his remaining student loans. Comments to friends about how he was dating beneath his potential. But that wasn't the worst part. Celia, shaking with anger, sent screenshots from her mother's phone things she had seen weeks ago, but hadn't fully processed at the time. Amanda is beneath us. We won't have to pretend to like her much longer. At least when Theo dumps her, she might finally get a real job. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I simply went still, like my body was conserving energy for something larger than anger. Then Celia sent one more message. You're not alone in this. Not anymore. For the first time in a long while, I believed it. For the next several days, the tension in the air felt electric, like a storm building, but refusing to break. I worked, I slept, I ate, but nothing felt normal. Every morning, I woke up wondering what new rumor Theo or Dolores had spread. Every night I fell asleep replaying Celia's messages, trying to remind myself that at least one person in that family still had a conscience. One afternoon, Celia texted me, Mom is planning something. Be careful. Then a second message, she wants a family dinner. It's an ambush. Don't go unless you're ready. Celia didn't need to explain. I knew exactly what Dolores wanted. Control submission, a performance of reconciliation, where I returned meek and apologetic, reaffirming my place beneath her thumb. I stared at her text for a long minute before replying, I'm going. Minutes later, Celia responded, I'll be there. You're not walking into that alone. The night of the dinner, I drove to the Thornton house with a strange, cold calm settling over me. I wasn't going to make peace. I wasn't going to be polite. I wasn't even going for Theo. I was going because I wanted them to look at me and see someone who refused to be intimidated into silence. When I walked in, I immediately understood Celia's warning. Theo was dressed in the suit I bought him last year for his promotion. His hair styled his smile a little too wide. Dolores hovered behind him, her eyes shining with forced warmth that barely concealed the steel underneath. Richard sat at the head of the table, already pouring wine, like he wanted to get this evening over with as quickly as possible. Welcome, Amanda, Dolores said, as if we were dear friends. We're so glad you came. We all said things we didn't mean. Theo stepped forward. Yeah, I've been thinking a lot. I just want us to talk. What he meant was, I want you to take the blame. I want you to pretend none of this happened. Celia appeared behind me, brushing her hand against my elbow, a quiet reassurance. She leaned close. We can leave at any time. I whispered back, we won't need to. Dinner started awkwardly. Dolores asked in her best hostess voice whether work had been slow lately, her smile thin and knowing. Theo complimented the pasta like he was auditioning for a cooking show. Celia sat tense and silent, watching the theatrics with thinly veiled disgust. Halfway through the meal, Dolores cleared her throat with performative delicacy. Amanda, she said we want to give you an opportunity to rebuild things with Theo. Families should heal, after all. I put my fork down. We aren't family, Dolores. She waved her hand. But you could be. Theo is willing to forgive. I turned to Theo. Are you? Or is your mother willing? Color rose in his cheeks. That's not... No, I interrupted softly. Because if you were, this wouldn't be a performance in front of your entire family. Dolores stiffened. How dare you? Actually, I said calmly, how dare you? The room went still. You want forgiveness, I continued. After calling my client to say I was unstable. After spreading lies about my business. After helping Theo tell people I was abusive. After fabricating stories about me showing up at his gym. After encouraging one-star reviews on my business page. After saying, I'm beneath you. Dolores opened her mouth, but I didn't give her the chance. And I know you said that once Theo dumped me, I'd finally get a real job. I know every word, Dolores. I've seen the messages. Celia inhaled sharply. Dolores went pale. Theo's fork clattered onto his plate. Richard muttered. Dolores, what did you do? Dolores snapped. This is absurd. You're spying. I didn't spy, I said. Celia found the messages weeks ago. She just didn't realize how deep the rot went. The scream that ripped through Dolores's expression wasn't audible, but it radiated through her eyes. Theo stood abruptly. This is ridiculous. You're twisting everything. No, I replied, and my voice finally carried the weight I'd been holding for weeks. But since you want honesty, let's talk about what you've been saying too. His jaw tightened. Amanda, you told your friends I was embarrassing but lucrative. You planned to upgrade after I paid off your loans. You called me a stepping stone. Richard turned to Theo, eyebrows raised. Is that true? Theo tried to form a sentence and failed. Dolores reached out, grabbing his wrist like she could shield him from the truth. Celia leaned forward, her voice finally cutting through the chaos. You humiliated her mom, both of you, and you tried to destroy her business because she finally had the self-respect to walk away. Dolores's head snapped toward her. You are not speaking to me like that. I'll speak however I want, Celia said softly, because I'm done being afraid of you. And where do you think you're going? Dolores demanded as Celia pushed her chair back. With her, Celia said, simply nodding at me. Theo scoffed. Oh, of course. You've always hated me. Celia turned to him with a look so broken and tired it hurt to witness. I never hated you. I just finally stopped pretending you were better than you are. Theo went silent. Dolores slammed her palm on the table. If you walk out that door, you are done with this family. Do you hear me? Done. Celia stood. Then I guess I'm done. My heart pounded as I rose too. I didn't touch Celia. I didn't say a word to Dolores or Theo. I simply walked out, my dignity intact, their illusions in ruins. Outside in the cool night air, Celia took a shaky breath. I didn't plan that, she murmured. I know, but I'm not sorry. Me neither. We sat in my car for a long minute, the silence full but not heavy. She looked over at me, her eyes red but steady. Amanda, they were never going to see you. Not really. They only see what serves them. I know, I said quietly. And I'm done letting them decide who I'm allowed to care about. Something warm and indescribable moved through me. Not romantic, something deeper, sturdier. The feeling of knowing someone has chosen to stand beside you when everyone else walked away. The war had become real. And Celia wasn't just on my side. She was willing to burn her bridges to stand there. I put the car in drive, and for the first time in weeks, I felt something like relief. We weren't done, not by a long shot, but together we were no longer outnumbered. The night after the dinner ambush, everything felt different. The tension that had wrapped itself around me for weeks was still there, but it wasn't crushing anymore. It had loosened the way a storm loosens when lightning finally hits the ground. Something had cracked open in that dining room, and though I didn't walk away victorious, I walked away unbroken. And for Dolores, for Theo, that felt like an unforgivable offense. Celia texted me at midnight. I'm okay. Mom is losing her mind. Dad pretending none of it happened. Theo punching walls. I'm staying at a friend's. Then another message, softer. Thank you for not letting them talk down to you. I've wanted to say things like that my whole life. I stared at the screen for a long time. I had expected fallout. I had expected chaos. But not this. Not Celia laying her entire family bare for the sake of truth. Not Celia choosing me, not romantically, but morally, loyally, even when it cost her everything. The next morning, we met for coffee at the same small cafe as before. She looked exhausted, but lighter, as if shedding her family's expectations had peeled away a weight she didn't realize she had been carrying. I torched my entire relationship with them, she said, trying to sound casual but failing. My mother called me ungrateful. Theo called me a traitor. Dad told me I needed to apologize for embarrassing the family. And how do you feel? I asked gently. She looked at me, eyes steady, free, angry, sad. Relieved, all at once. I nodded. You don't have to regret it. I don't, she whispered. But I think they want me to. especially Theo. She hesitated, then leaned forward. Can I tell you something I should have said a long time ago? I braced myself. I always knew he didn't deserve you. Her voice was quiet, but it was the kind of quiet that holds truth, not fear. Everyone acted like Theo was the prize, but he treated me like a burden my whole life. And he treated you like someone he could mold into what he wanted. You never tried to be anything but yourself. Something warm rose in my chest. Loyalty wasn't something I expected from Theo's family, but Celia's loyalty wasn't blind. It was earned through respect, through honesty, through survival. Later, as we walked to our cars, she said, "They're going to come after you harder now that I sided with you." I figured, I said. So, we have to be ready. The word we hung in the air. It wasn't romantic, it wasn't complicated. It was simply the truth of what we had become, a team, forged in the fire Dolores and Theo set beneath us. And we did need to be ready because it didn't take long for the next strike to land. 3 days later, I got a call from my assistant. "There's a man and a woman here demanding to see you. They won't leave." I didn't need names. I knew exactly who it was. Dolores and Richard Thornton stood in the doorway of my workshop, dressed as if they were attending a board meeting, rather than confronting a plumber they'd been publicly belittling for weeks. Dolores's expression was a brittle mix of fury and desperation. Richard looked tired, like someone who had spent years keeping the peace in a war he never had the courage to stop. Dolores didn't waste time. "How much?" I blinked. "Excuse me." "How much to leave both our children alone?" Dolores demanded, stepping forward. "Name the price." I laughed. Actually laughed. "You think this is about money?" "Everything is about money," she snapped. "Theo told me you wanted him to pay off your materials debt. Celia told us you're funding her last semester. You're taking advantage of both of them." "I offered to help Celia because you threatened to cut her off right before her final exams," I said. "And Theo's the one who asked me for money." Dolores's mouth tightened. "You're lying." I didn't flinch. He told his friends I was his stepping stone to an upgrade. Should I show you the texts? Richard cleared his throat, his voice low. "We're not here to fight. We're here to negotiate." "There's nothing to negotiate," I said. "You don't get to ruin my business, smear my name, and then offer me a buyout to disappear." Dolores's voice sharpened. "If you walk away, we will make sure you never work in this town again." "Funny you say that," I replied calmly. "Because Celia found documents showing you've been using her college fund to pay for your house, your country club membership, and Theo's car. So if we're talking about ruined reputations..." Dolores froze. Richard went pale. I continued, "Her name belongs on the house deed, not yours." They didn't say another word. They turned and left so quickly the bell above my workshop door rattled from the force. That night, Celia came over with a thick folder in her arms. "I found more," she said breathlessly. "Bank statements, transfers, stolen funds. Years of it. My grandmother left that money for my education, and they used it like a personal piggy bank." I sat beside her on my couch as she laid everything out, rows of transactions, forged signatures, missing documentation. Her hand shook as she traced the numbers. "They always told me to be grateful," she whispered, "but I was the one funding their lives." "Do you want to report it?" I asked. She shook her head slowly. "Not yet, but I want them to know I know." So we drafted a message, calm, concise, devastating. She sent it to the family group chat. Within minutes, half the extended relatives were calling, gasping, arguing, panicking. Theo called 13 times. Dolores sent a storm of messages insisting it was a misunderstanding. Richard wrote paragraphs about family unity. Celia muted the entire thread without replying once. Weeks passed. She finished her exams, graduated with honors. I sat in the front row, cheering like an idiot. Her parents weren't invited. Most of the extended family wasn't either. Only the cousins who had supported her came, the ones who saw her not the role she was expected to play. Around that time, Theo tried one last time to reach out. Pathetic apologies, confessions, claims he still loved me, that he made mistakes, that he could change. I didn't respond. Celia read the messages beside me on my porch and laughed softly. "He's sorry he lost control," she said. "Not sorry for what he did." She wasn't wrong. When Dolores attempted reconciliation a month later, tears trembling voice, a gift basket full of overpriced chocolates, Celia met her at the door. "Which daughter are you here for?" she asked flatly. "The one you treated like a trophy, or the one you treated like a wallet?" Dolores cried harder. Celia closed the door. We donated the gift basket to a food bank. Life changed after that. Quietly at first, then all at once. My business thrived without the constant weight of their toxicity. Celia started her job at an environmental law firm, a place where her intelligence was valued rather than exploited. Sometimes we sat on my porch after work, watching the sun disappear behind the trees, talking about nothing and everything. We weren't romantically entangled, that wasn't our story, but she became the person who understood me better than I understood myself, and I became the one person she could trust without fear. Theo never learned how to be alone. Dolores never learned humility. Richard never learned courage. But Celia and I learned something important, that family isn't defined by blood or obligation. It's defined by the people who choose to stand by you when everyone else tries to knock you down. And I learned something about myself too. I wasn't dating down. I wasn't beneath anyone. I wasn't a stepping stone. I had simply given loyalty to the wrong people. And now that I'd taken it back, my life finally was mine again. Life after the Thornton family scandal didn't snap into place overnight. Healing rarely happens in a straight line. Some days felt calm, freeing light. Other days, old wounds reopened. In small, unexpected moments, the scent of a cologne in a grocery store aisle reminding me of Theo, a hard hat in my workshop making me wince, or the ring of a phone call I wasn't ready to answer. But something else was growing too. Something new, something steady. A sense of internal quiet I hadn't felt in years. The absence of anxiety is a presence all its own, a kind of peace you don't recognize until the noise is finally gone. One evening, about 2 months after the graduation ceremony, I was closing up my shop when I saw Celia pull into the parking lot. She stepped out of her car with a stack of papers under one arm and a familiar frown on her face, the one she wore when she was thinking too hard and pretending she wasn't. "You're still working?" she asked. "Someone has to keep the pipes of this town from exploding," I replied with a smile. "What's that?" She held out the stack. "Letters from my grandmother." I froze. "Your grandmother?" "She hid them," Celia said softly. "Mom kept them from me. I found these in a file box Dad brought over, probably by accident." I took the letters. The envelopes were worn, the ink faded, the handwriting elegant and slanted. She wrote every year, Celia whispered. Birthdays, milestones, advice. She wanted me to have guidance when she was gone. "Celia, I'm so sorry." She shook her head. "Mom didn't want me to have anything that didn't go through her. She controlled the narrative. She always has." We sat inside my workshop, lights dim, surrounded by tools and faint metallic smells. She opened the letters one by one. They were filled with warmth, wisdom, and fierce love. Her grandmother had believed in her, had seen her potential long before anyone else had. When Celia reached a letter from her 17th birthday, her voice broke. She wrote, "Always choose the person who brings out your courage, not the one who feeds your fear." Celia swallowed hard. "I spent my whole life choosing fear." "You're not anymore," I said gently. She nodded, blinking fast. "Because of you." "Celia." "No, let me say this." She turned to me fully, her eyes clear, but vulnerable. "Everyone thinks the drama ended at that dinner, but it didn't. I've spent months untangling myself from them, and you've been the one constant thing through every unraveling." I didn't know what to say, so I didn't interrupt. "You know what I realized," she continued quietly. "Family is supposed to be safe. But I only felt safe when I walked out with you that night. You were the only one who didn't want anything from me, who didn't expect me to play a role." The air between us thickened, not romantic, but intimate in a deeper way. The intimacy of mutual survival of two people who had stood in a fire together and found each other in the smoke. "Celia," I murmured, "you saved me too." She smiled at that, small and tired and real. We saved each other. For a long moment we sat without speaking. It wasn't silence, it was acknowledgement. Eventually she straightened. "There's something else." I raised an eyebrow. "More." She exhaled. "Mom's been telling the family I manipulated you, that I turned you against Theo because I envied his relationship." I almost laughed. "Of course she is." "And now she's threatening to sue me for defamation for exposing the stolen college fund." "Is that even possible?" I asked. Celia gave a humorless laugh. "No, and she knows it. But she's desperate, and when she's desperate, she lashes out." I leaned back, arms crossed. "What do you want to do?" She hesitated. "I want to stop letting her dictate my choices." "So choose differently," I said simply. She looked at me with that soft, steady gaze she used when she wanted to memorize something. "I am." In the weeks that followed, Celia officially filed paperwork to reclaim the assets in her name, forcing her parents into a legal corner they could no longer escape with charm or intimidation. Extended family members tried to intervene, calling it unfortunate, dramatic, unnecessary. Celia responded only once. "My grandmother didn't leave her money for designer clothes and country club fees. She left it for me. If you have a problem with that, that's your burden, not mine. Theo reached out again during that time. This time it wasn't an apology, it was an accusation. Amanda, why are you turning my sister against me? I stared at the text before deleting it without replying. I wasn't turning Celia against anyone. She was simply seeing clearly for the first time in her life. But seeing clearly can be painful, and healing is messy. One night, Celia showed up at my house soaked from the rain hair sticking to her forehead. I had a panic attack at work, she whispered. I didn't know where else to go. I brought her inside, wrapped her in a blanket, made tea. She sat on the couch, breathing slowly, her hands trembling. You're okay, I murmured. You're safe. She nodded, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. I'm just tired of fighting. I sat beside her, then rest. I'll fight for a while. Her eyes closed as she leaned her head on my shoulder. Thank you. We stayed like that for nearly an hour. And when she finally fell asleep, I realized something heavy and true, not romantic, but powerful. We weren't just surviving together anymore. We were building something new out of the ruins. Not love, not partnership, something quieter, something fiercely loyal, something that didn't need a label. A chosen family of two. Months later, when her case finally settled and her parents were forced to hand over every document, every asset, every last remaining lie, Celia came to my house with a small, shaking smile. It's over, she said. And when she said the words, she wasn't talking about legalities. She was talking about the last pieces of fear falling away. We walked to my porch and sat side by side, watching the sunset spill gold across the sky. She rested her hand on mine, not in romance, not in longing, but in gratitude. We made it, she whispered. Yeah, I said softly. We did. And for the first time since the storm began, the air